Hey y'all, guess what? We have a super cool guest today, and I would say it is worthy of good luck bear. And this is many good luck because we have Heather Hoekstra. What's your new firm going to be called?
Well, I can't disclose the full
Oh,
name yet because
okay. Well then,
because right, because it'll be a triple named firm,
so then
but
we have Heather Hoekstra, attorney at law. And also, Heather was a participant of the Actively Authentic Allyship program. And it has been about, what would you say, 3 months since you graduated?
yeah, it has.
And so we're going to talk to Heather all about what made her want to take the course, what she learned, and then what's happened since then. And so, Heather, thank you for coming. First of all, hey, boo, I missed you.
I miss you too. Thanks for inviting me.
How have you
Um,
been?
good, good, good. You know,
She's being modest, y'all. We was catching up before. She has more business than she can handle. She's expanding. Life is going well for her.
yes,
Um,
it is. And it's going well for you too.
yes, it is. Um, So, Heather, then let's just jump right into it. So, you took the Actively Authentic Allyship 30-hour training program
Mhm.
and learned all about racism and skills for connection, epigenetics. And so, tell me about your experience, or first tell me what made you want to take the course.
You.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, because we got to know each other a little bit in the in Bridgette's course. But I don't know, you carry with you like this level of wisdom and knowledge and compassion and also connection. And so I thought anything that has, you leading it would be both really interesting, um, diverse in its like approaches, and also just fun. Um, but also like meaningful and um, you know, emotional is the wrong word because that always takes a kind of negative feel to it. But I mean, we were gonna
Experiential.
we were gonna show up for this, and I felt like you and Tracy would certainly. I mean, I didn't know Tracy was involved at the time, but it would certainly be a kind of loving and deep conversation. So that's why.
Well, I appreciate all of that. And you are right about the fun, although there were times where it was not so fun, but that was the state of the nation. Um, but I mean, what made you want to like embark on actually getting anti-racism education instead of just like what made you be
Spending time with yeah, I
yeah,
get it.
what
No,
made you want to be trained and you paid a black woman like you did all the right things in the what was it that made you have that commitment?
right. Well, I mean, obviously there was the the unrest at the beginning or the middle of the year around George Floyd's murder that sort of prompted. I mean, it prompted basically the entire conversation with the entire country. Um, but I mean, given that I'm now a participating member of the economy and want to make sure that uh, I approach it as approach the position that I may or may not be in, with being a boss and whatnot. I wanted to make sure that I was educated and sensitive to everybody's or other people's experiences that aren't similar to my own. And one way of doing that was to take your course. And I'm looking forward to part two, actually.
We are working on it. It is the Worldscaper Academy.
Hmm.
And it has a whole development plan, but that's not for this episode because
Okay.
it's still a plan. I'll tell you
Okay.
about that later.
All
Um,
right.
but so then what do you think? Where do I want to go with this? When you started the course, what were you expecting?
I don't know. Because, well, I think because a little bit was, I know that you were working with somebody, and I didn't know who, uh, but that you were sort of, let's put it this way, like you were sort of scrambling. You sound, at least, let's put it this way. You made it sound like you weren't organizing it. And so I thought it was like it was going to be a bit, or not that you weren't organizing it, but that you were sort of frantically putting it together. and and I was incredibly pleasantly surprised at how well you made it sound like it was going to be a little, just a little bit less organized than it ended
So
up
this is
being.
the thing that you got to know about me, Heather, and I got to do better with this. Is I am incredibly hard on myself,
Yeah.
and that's where the frantic comes in.
Mm-hmm.
But then the execution is never as bad as the hard I am on myself, or would never have even been close.
Right.
You would have just been getting a refund. Um, but thank you then, because that means that you were more willing to give me a chance, especially if you thought it was you gonna show up and it would be. What's funny is, remember I was telling you I'm consulting
Mhm.
now. Somewhat the course that I'm consulting for, where it was like allyship training gone wrong.
Mhm.
Um, but Heather, what do you think your biggest takeaway from the, like, after going through the full 30 hours,
Mhm.
but really 30 plus, because we've since made the course 12 weeks.
Oh wow.
We didn't want to
Mhm. Yeah, you were
we
away
went
for a number of
over,
months.
and
Yeah.
we, in the discussion with Get Rich, we wanted to make sure that that could stay in. So what do you think your biggest takeaway was?
I think there are a couple of them. Um, One was sort of personally that I do need to take myself out of my head and, not so much go with the gut feeling, because that can be kind of a impassioned feeling, but to sort of take myself out of my hands, stop trying to justify stuff, stop trying to understand things, and just sort of lead with my heart and my stomach, I think is one of the things we talked about a lot. And that was hard for me to do, and still is, despite the fact that I have actually told other people that they need to do this. um,
That's how it starts. That's the problem.
yeah,
That means you're still doing it if
yeah,
you're advocating for it.
yeah, exactly. um, and and it's also really nice too, because when you do it, it just flows more easily. Like there's less pulling back. Hi, puppy. And
He's
there's
and
less.
way intrusive.
Yeah, it was really cute though. I think the other thing was that the experience of everybody's life is both surprising and different, right? So even though we were a bunch of um, white women, each one of us had really different backgrounds, and and I think you've talked about this before. Like it's one of the things that is really unfortunate about the way that we've compartmentalized race, is that white is just this amorphous, huge section of the population, and it's not really. I mean, it is equally or interestingly as diverse as it is within minority communities. And so, I mean, it has to be, right? Because everyone's lives are so different. But, it was fascinating to learn like the other Tracy's history, and really surprising.
Oh my goodness, wasn't it? Was for me, like, you know, so tell me more. It was hard not to be so interested in her story
I
that that
know.
became the subject matter.
I
And then
know.
I would have been white centering, right? But I was just damn curious.
I was just like, you were what? You were raised where? And
Right.
also you're like this insane like marathon runner, like triathlete. I was like, that's awesome. But everybody had really interesting stories. And so I think a lot of it was one of the main things that you extract from the course is that people just want to be heard, in addition to things being fixed in their lives. But it's more that it's the acknowledgement of their story and their history that is important. And so that the overall structure of the course is
Our
obviously.
story and
Mhm.
it's our story and
Yes.
our history. But I get what you're saying. I'm just
Yeah. No,
adding.
no, no. I'm saying like the overall structure of the course is very much about our history, but you know, and that's incredibly important. And obviously, there need to be a lot of reforms with how we learn about, how we just don't gloss over things that are horrific and whatnot. I think it's important to understand them. But also, we deal on a day-to-day basis with individuals, and so it's important for them and for us to feel like we've been heard. And honestly, uh, that is how it sort of works, especially also like in the workplace, for instance. So if you just feel overlooked and your concerns are not taken into consideration, then you feel deprived, right? And that applies to everybody, like as a human. But it can be more so with marginalized communities and the BIPOC community.
Uh, I want to be clear. I wasn't correcting you. I was just making sure I was clear for our audience.
Oh, right.
Um,
Yeah.
because it is our history, and I appreciate what you said, like on the individual person to person level. Often I get asked, like, and I even had to go through my own hurdles about my teaching style for the subject matter.
Mhm.
Because it does, while I can see why people think it prioritizes white comfort, it doesn't. Um, you don't want to do that, but then I also know that if I really want you to take in the subject matter and be receptive, and it's already a difficult subject, I have to like be considerate to where you're starting from in the journey and how you're feeling when you want to learn, and how so we show up as individuals wanting to be seen and heard and validated, and then guided along in a journey.
Yeah.
um and so that's why we focus on connection in the course, because if you, to me, you start from there and then you can strategize together. And the next level will be co-conspiratorship. But that is, I think that's course 4. It's about the course. But
Oh, well, I'm excited to hear. So, because
I'm excited
I've
to
been off of social media, so because I just don't have the time, and I just basically completely dropped off, and so I just haven't been staying up to date with anything.
it's okay. It's not on social media either. I just don't
Oh, okay.
lay out my whole plan before I write out my whole plan. And people be doing what I said I was gonna do.
Mhm.
Um, so Heather, it's been 3 months since you took the course. You're busy like crazy. I know that you work with conservatorship and estate law.
Mhm.
Tell me, how have you used this information or used your knowledge from the course? Like you learn how to do your fair share of thinking about race in society. Like, what takeaways have you used since taking the course?
I mean, it's the listening aspect of it, taking in the story. I mean, obviously, I have to oftentimes direct people to a certain point that I might need just because we're limited on time. um, but uh, but I think, I mean, in terms of the actual work, I have not um, been able to apply much with regard to race specifically because I have not had. I mean, I do have uh, several clients of different races, right? But it's more just the general approach to the practice and showing up as a present person who acknowledges that the reason this person is here is that they felt unlistened to, and that, I mean, there's obviously a lot of other reasons as well, but given that I'm a litigator, I generally come across people who feel they've been robbed of something, um, and and so it's just taking myself out of the story as much as possible and sort of just letting them guide it is really helpful. I mean, it's been, this whole year has been just this series of, small, tiny little epiphanies and growth and tools to learn how to deal with my own anxieties and the stresses of life. And um, the course was really it was really good to sort of put me back into the conversation. And I feel like I've actually been missing it because I've been sort of so busy. And I definitely still am, listening to lots of podcasts and reading and stuff, but I sort of am thinking about things and how we can improve the world. But it's just all such a mess.
Are you having conversations in your sphere of influence though?
How do you mean
Or is it
exactly?
meaning? So the world is a mess. There's plenty of rich subject matter to talk about. And remember, we teach actively authentic allyship.
Mhm.
So there's conversations at the dinner table, it's conversations with racist Uncle Fred, conversations, are you using the technique
Yeah. I mean, there
to use?
there are. I mean, it's
Because
like,
yes,
right,
you've done your inner work and you are a transformed person, but I'm in this for the long haul and the goal of the shared future. So that's my focus.
right.
Are you talking to people about what you've learned? You're listening to the podcast? Is it going beyond just being a part of your inner world?
Not recently, I'll be honest. Not recently. I mean, I'm constantly thinking about it and how it applies, generally the tools that were provided. Um, but in terms of actual action, no. I mean, I think that one of the unfortunate things is that as we distance ourselves in time from the summer, uh, everyone goes back into their sort of comfort zones, right? And I'm still trying as much as possible to engage with issues of racism and privilege and economic disparity. Um, but it's not real engagement right now because I'm still just, I mean, I've got a couple of ideas that I've been, I want to, push for different things within the government or whatnot, but but there's no way that I could like start a nonprofit or get anything going that way, like actually, like with your R&R village. I mean, I just contribute money.
And so my stance. I'll take all forms of allyship and make something good with them.
Yeah.
However, as your anti-racist, I cannot say that I am not feeling a little bit of little tender-hearted
Yeah.
about that and slightly grumpy. Um, because we talked about in the course. Now here's the thing, it's a journey and it's a new identity awareness and identity that you take on.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm want to be clear, I'm not coming down on you, but
It's fine.
the disappointment is that this is not something that can be just done with the inner work with you.
Yeah, I know that. I do know
And
that. I do
so,
know.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I would like to urge you to begin to ramp that back up. Other because you don't want your allyship to be performative.
That's true. No, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I'm definitely keen to. It's just sort of when you're drowning in everything, it's not, and I'm just making excuses, but that's not what you do.
Life is difficult. I ain't saying it's not. I just don't want. Remember, we have everybody's on a spectrum. Like we're either actively working to dismantle it or we're allowing the system to stay as it is. And unfortunately, because of the way our society is set up, those are the choices we're making. But the encouraging thing is that we're all a whole species evolving and people are doing different things at different times. So, like, I'm actively working to dismantle it right now and in the foreseeable future. Other people are actively working to dismantle it. You have done things to invest and to educate yourself. That is actively dismantling it. Making sure you raise anti-racist kids would be another way of
Yeah.
actively dismantling it. Contributing money is always a way. So there are things you can be doing. All I'm just asking you to do is remember to keep doing them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've never been much of an activist. Like, I mean, that is an understatement. I've always been sort of one who thought that, like, for instance, my background was in initially in environmental law and environmental policy, and so I was always very much like work. I've always viewed that the only way to uh, fix the system is to fix the system is to actually fix the system that will then incentivize the benefit that I want, right? Um, and so we had thought that it was, beneficial to try to make carbon a sellable thing on the market, and so that that would incentivize people to not pollute as much, right? Like with greenhouse gases, but it's not really working because of the structure of the system that was set up. And so I very much do feel that government is going to be the primary vehicle through which these changes are made, right? The necessary changes of investment in communities and bringing people up. But because of where we are right now in this country, it's really very frustrating because we have great ideas. People have got lots of interesting concepts that could be applied at pilot level. I mean, essentially your R&R program is a pilot level program. And, I just want everybody to have the ability to, live their best life, right? I mean, everybody's entitled to do that, right? Everybody should be able to have what.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I don't believe that government will be the primary mechanism because government is the mechanism that has us here.
Yeah, I mean, it
And
isn't. It isn't.
I want to be clear. I'm not
Mhm.
advocating for a society that doesn't have government. That is not what I'm advocating for. But for the problem that of Black liberation
Mhm.
and anti-Black sentiment being remedied throughout society and then equity being created, I think if we don't do it at an individual level and a corporate level,
Mhm.
we will. It ain't enough government to make the change happen fast enough.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, we've had such a bad period of time, and we're going to have to spend a lot of time let's just talk at the federal level, right? You've got, I mean, we're going to be recovering from what those last 4 years, and who knows what's going to happen in the next election or whatnot. I mean, it's such a mess, but I just feel like there are some things in the market that are done well by the market, and there are some things that are just done better by a large organization like a government. And yes, it's true. Redlining. I mean, that is a primary example of where the government interfered, and it was just horrific for generations. We're still obviously feeling the effects of it. And I mean, I think that would be like a primary counterpoint, right, to the idea that government could help. But if you have people in place that aren't intending to punish or hurt a population of individuals on the basis of race, and who actually want to create programs that, right, as Michelle Obama says, right, like that, give a hand up as opposed to a hand down, then or whatever the phrase is. I think that you can uplift an entire generation of individuals, right? I mean, you could. I've been back in college. I read about. I think it was either William James or Henry James. I mean, they're brothers, I think, but they were living during the middle of the Civil War, and they were privileged individuals, and they were like essentially exempted from service. Maybe they had bone spurs, and but maybe perhaps it was William James. So he was saying that he was really missing out on this fundamental part of what was going to form his generation, which was serving in the war, on either side. I mean, he was North, but uh, to be a part of this national story and to be a part of this national um, experience, and he was being deprived of it because of the fact that he was in college, I think. And so he came up with the idea of essentially creating like a, how do we foster and facilitate a community of a national community, because we all have to get along, right? So everybody's got to come from this. Everybody's from the United States. How do we foster that without having to subject people to the horrors of war and death on the battlefield, right? And one of the ways was to create a kind of civil, a civil corps, right, of people who are required to serve for 2 years, and they're sort of shipped from all over the parts of the country, and they're mingling with all sorts of people from other parts of the country, and they're doing things that provide service to public service, right? It could be now, right, distribution of vaccines, like helping, volunteers showing up, and they're not volunteers. I mean, it is conscripted, but but it's required. Everybody, like say at 18, has to do it, just like they do in other countries where they have conscripted military service. But if you're a pacifist, for instance, like a Quaker, you are able to opt out and to do a much more service-oriented project. And obviously during this time, you're taken care of just like you would be in the military. Your food, shelter, all those kind of things are necessary. And then at the end of it, you get, when your cerebral cortex is fully formed at 25, you get a pot of cash, right? Like, so instead of kind of a UBI type handout, right, every month to sort of let you live a little less miserably, every month, you get this kind of substantial sum, 25, 35, 45, $55,000, and you can do with it what you want. And, most people are going to invest in themselves, right? They're going to take this opportunity and the connections that they made in this civilian corps, and, they're going to have those, they're going to learn through a process while they're in that, like, of the incentive of the feeling of committing to a community, right? While also, again, being exposed to people from all over the country, from all walks of life, rich, poor, Black, white, Native American, everybody. And then you're doing this at the height of your youth, and everyone's learning things and they're all just like excited, and then you take with it a part of you becomes part of the national identity, right? Like there is something that you sort of absorb as an American, and that we're all in this together, more so than we feel right now, right? We definitely don't feel that united at all. And then you get this benefit at the end where you then are able to pursue your education, invest in a small business, bring yourself up. And we have this example, a very successful example of this with the GI Bill, and that the GI Bill pulled people out of the working class or, poverty. They served their time, essentially with the military, and then they got a free education. And it brought up an entire generation of people, right? The great generation of the people who had served in the war, and the people who had served afterwards. And they had this amazing opportunity to further themselves as individuals. They became much, people were civically minded. Do you not think so?
So the GI Bill wasn't, as you know, the GI Bill wasn't afforded to everyone.
Yes, I do know that.
And then so my resistance to that is that
Mhm.
people who were became trained to be militarized
Yeah, but I don't want, but I want them to be
and
not
then got
military.
rewarded through stability and retirement and pensions, and so it become like, so unchecked, we get exactly with those systems that you're praising, we get
Yeah.
exactly what we have.
Hmm. I mean, we do if it continues, right? And it gets I mean, government the civil rights movement had a significant impact on the way that, civil rights were protected. And so there isn't going, I mean, I don't think it'll be unchecked like it was in the 40s and 50s, right? Where you essentially had Jim Crow still in place, where it was like legitimate to separate people and to prevent individuals who were Black from receiving benefits that were equally afforded to whites. I just don't think that that would be what happens today, at least at the level of the government, right? Um, Certainly not in the places that I live. But I mean, if that could be afforded to everybody and people aren't excluded, just as everyone has to participate in the program, everybody participates in the program and they receive this benefit, it won't have with it the GI Bill aspect of militarizing people. It'll have the idea of building community. But I mean, these are just, we just need societal changes. And in order to get societal changes where we have greater faith in government, we believe, we have greater exposure to individuals from places who have different backgrounds. We create with us a national identity, like a rekindled, caring national identity. I mean, you can't just wait for like corporations and whatnot to do it, because my concern
It
is,
has to be legislated. I agree. I just feel like, so it's the chicken egg kind of thing. Like
yeah,
the individuals change the societal systems and the societal systems change the individuals. Um, but we have to get a little bit further in this discussion. We
sorry.
could talk about this forever. Um, so Heather, this we're approaching the part of the show where you get to ask me a question that I am not prepared for.
Okay. Okay.
And then I get to think about it, decide how to answer, be thrown off guard, and go, whatever it is that happens from the question. But you get to ask me something. So, what do you want to ask? And I remember to tell her ahead of time, y'all.
Because people are like,
Well, no, because I'm always forgetting and then being like, so what do you want to ask? And then there's this long silence. And so if people are watching every week, which I hope y'all are, like, subscribe and share, then they're used to me forgetting. But this time it's an achievement in me remembering.
well, there was one which was, have you, so since May, right, of 2020, where the protests began, there was a lot of hope and optimism within, I think, the Black community. I'm speaking amorphously, but at least with friends and whatnot, about the actual change that might happen. Certainly, I mean, I definitely think that there's certainly a lot more realization and acknowledgement of the people's participation in the system just by receiving benefits evident in their privilege, right? But what are you most disappointed about since then?
Um, so there's a lot. I don't know if I have a most, because I don't sit and like rank them. Um, so the optimism, I still have optimism that things are improving,
Mm-hmm.
because just looking at, see, it's like comparing this iteration to previous iterations, I can see increments of improvement as it relates to solving or having all the solutions fully implemented for liberation. I think we're a long way away. So I have a lot of feelings in response to that question. I don't know if I have a lot of words. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that hopeful. I did you well, I said it in the course. My expectations wasn't that high, right? Like so, but it's because history shows. So like, and then that's human nature. But that doesn't mean my hope wasn't there
Mm-hmm.
that things would really be different. And then there's it is this weird balance of figuring out how to manage the energy in the sense that you become hopeful that and you have to be energized and enthusiastic, like things are going to change and you got to know it in the fabric of your being in order for things to change. But the feeling of and knowing the comparison, like what you feel and know, and then what you see in reality, there's usually a big disconnect, and there's a lot of disappointment in that disconnect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you can't not do it if you want what you are hoping for. But that journey of hope, it can be daunting. So the biggest disappointment is that I was right about my assessment, right? Like everybody ain't, it just is what it is. That's the journey we on, and this will come along with the journey.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're making hopes and being optimistic, you want what you're hoping for and being optimistic. You don't want the reality that you have to accept.
Yeah.
So yeah, I I don't know if that answered it, but
No, the disconnect between the kind of hope and the realities.
yeah, it's like. But I'll say this: I feel more liberated than I've ever felt in my life, and that's the start. And then the thing that I am optimistic about is what can be created in this iteration for the next generation. So, like, yes, it may not be solved in this whole lifetime, but it won't be as bad the next time because it wasn't as bad this time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I have heard that we're currently living in the most consequential time of human history.
The most who?
Consequential time in human history. And that if we don't act with regard to several things like the disparity in wealth, the climate change, whatnot, it's basically just all over.
So yeah, that I mean, I think we're here. We're there, yeah, in a
Yeah.
lot of different ways. And so the only thing, my request for universe, ancestors, the allness, so I don't really want to live fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with dying.
Yeah.
I'm unwilling to live messed up again anymore. It's just not what I'm gonna do.
And do you mean like emotionally as well as other things, or
I mean that emotions are a part of life. Like feelings, you're supposed to have them all. But
yeah.
I don't want to I'm not gonna live in misery. Pain happens, suffering is optional.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get to a place where I'm suffering, then my request is that don't put me in that place.
Right. Right.
um because I have lots of liberation to create and are in our village. And I will say this: finding things to do to create equity is an active, authentic allyship if you don't never change nothing about you. And
Mm-hmm.
that's to all of y'all out there. Even if you are, you know what, I'm not gonna think about all the ways that I have been racist, but I'm gonna do something to help dismantle systemic oppression. You find a way to create equity and then commit to it, and you will have done something. Will you have done enough? No. And I'm not even gonna give you a pass that that is enough. But something is better than nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you.
It's okay, Heather. You did not disappoint me. You asked me about the state of things.
Yeah.
Well, you only disappoint me if you don't do something now. It's a journey. I'm not so like it's not a grade to get. It's not a you're not dead, right? Like so it's only if you're dead, then and you stop here, then it's like, oh man, that's disappointing. But it's not
Yeah.
disappointing. You just gotta we talked about this. Like you take a break and you get back on. I also haven't been doing as much work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I know this, I'm energized to pick back up.
And I am too. And I
See?
am too. Yes. Yeah.
So,
It's constantly learning, constantly learning. And I'm, yeah, I mean, I'm, yeah. Yeah.
well, I think we are good there. And I want to thank you very much, Heather, for coming and having this discussion and let us know. Is there anything you want to say to everyone?
Everybody take Alexis's course.
That's right. It is
And
money
then
well.
support her endeavors in R&R Village.
Yes, support R&R Village. It is Heather gave me some good legal advice on it. And she doesn't know. I'll be asking for more.
And I will give it away for free.
Yes. And that is what? Allyship, right?
Yeah.
Like that's social capital. And that is a person to person reparation. So there's always something you can do. Find your something and keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Talk to y'all next week.
Bye.